So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our panelists this year that are going to talk on specific topics related to navigating your life and your work in life and your professional path as a scholar at Harvard. So we'll start with Meg Rithmire. Meg Rithmire is the F. Warren McFarlan Associate Professor in the Business, Government, and International Economy Unit at the Harvard Business School. Professor Rithmire, who holds a PhD in government from Harvard, has primary expertise in the comparative political economy of development with a focus on China and Asia. Her first book, Land Bargains in Chinese Capitalism, examines the role of land politics, urban governments, and local property rights regimes in the Chinese economic reforms. A new project investigates the relationship between capital and the state and globalization in Asia. Meg has received both the HBS Student Association Teaching Award and the Charles M. Williams Award for Excellence in Teaching. She's also a faculty associate of the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies, a member of the Asia Center's Faculty Committee on Southeast Asia, and a public intellectual fellow at the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. She lives in Cambridge with her husband and 2 small children. Meg will talk about navigating Harvard as a faculty member in one of the professional schools, navigating hierarchies, priority setting, and time management, as well as issues of mentoring and managing work and life. We also have Kang-Kuen Ni. Kang-Kuen is an associate professor of chemistry and chemical biology and of physics in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Kang-Kuen, who works in the area of cold atoms and molecules, pursues new approaches to cool molecules to standing still and to control them individually for fundamental studies of chemical reactions, quantum information processing, and quantum many-body physics. This work opens new research opportunities for the study of ultra-cold chemical reactions, quantum phase transitions, and quantum information science. Kang-Kuen obtained her PhD in physics from the University of Colorado at Boulder. In her spare time, she enjoys mountain biking in nearby forests with her daughter. Kang-Kuen will talk about managing one's workload and work and life, as well as helpful mentoring. She will also talk about some of the pleasures of a faculty position at Harvard. Next, we have Catherine Brekus. Catherine Brekus is the Charles Warren Professor of the History of Religion in America at Harvard Divinity School, and also the chair of the Committee on the Study of Religion in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Catherine is also affiliated with the program in American Studies and in the History Department. She holds a PhD in American Studies from Yale. After teaching for 21 years at the University of Chicago, Catherine joined us at Harvard in 2014. Her research focuses on the history of religion in colonial North America and the United States, with a particular emphasis on the history of women, gender, Christianity, and the evangelical movement. She's currently working on a book about the idea of the United States as a divinely chosen nation. I'm not done.
That's enough.
If that's not all. Twice in the past 5 years, she was also named the Harvard Divinity School Outstanding Teacher of the Year. Catherine will talk about getting settled at Harvard, navigating the university and your department, and managing work and life. Dustin Tingley. Dustin Tingley is the Professor of Government in the Government Department in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Dustin is also the Deputy Vice Provost for Advances in Learning and the Faculty Director for the Harvard Initiative on Learning and Teaching. He received his PhD in politics from Princeton. His research interests include international relations, international political economy, statistical methodology, and experimental approaches to political science. His book on American foreign policy, titled Sailing the Water's Edge, sorry, my papers are out of order, was the Gladys M. Kammerer Award for the best book published in the field of U.S. national policy. Recent projects include attitudes towards global climate technologies and policies and the intersection of causal inference and machine learning methods for the social sciences. Dustin and his team have also created Harvard Link, as Judy referenced, which is a personalized resource for faculty and staff that uses existing data sources to make suggestions on researchers, courses, organizations, news, and events related to your interests. Dustin will talk about resources for your teaching and scholarship. And finally, but not least, we have Evelynn Hammonds, who is the Barbara Gutmann Rosenkrantz Professor of the History of Science and Professor of African and African American Studies in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. In addition to earning undergraduate and graduate degrees in physics and electrical engineering, Evelynn earned her PhD in the Department of History of the History of Science at Harvard and was a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Evelynn, who's been on the Harvard faculty for 16 years, focuses on the history of scientific, medical, and socio-political concepts of race and gender in the United States. She also works on projects to improve the representation of women of color in STEM fields, is a member of the Committee on Women in Science, Technology, and Medicine of the National Academy of Sciences, and she was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2018. Evelynn will talk about mentoring, teaching, and time management. So we'll start with Meg.
Do you want me to sit or stand?
Oh, you can sit, that's fine.
Okay.
Unless you prefer to stand.
It's slightly less terrifying to sit, so I think I'll do that. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Judy, for inviting all of us. And I think we're going from most junior to most senior. And so I am in an interesting position because I do not have this thing, tenure, at Harvard. And I may not get it, but I am happy. So take whatever advice. And I think that if I don't get tenure, I'll probably find a job somewhere, and I'll still be okay. So I guess I'll say that. I'll also say that this thing that the provost described, which is like, I did my PhD in the government department, and so when I took a faculty position at the business school, I thought, I know nothing about the business school, which was true, but I know a lot about Harvard, and so I don't have to worry about this kind of stuff, and it was so incorrect in many ways, and so I'm glad that you're here. Just one example of that was that I was still treating the library system as if I was some graduate student taking pride in my ability to navigate everything on my own, and it took until maybe my third year to realize that I don't have to go search through a bunch of things. I can contact a librarian and say, I need to understand what materials we have on, post-war Malaysia, and someone will collate those things and help you. So you don't have to do everything yourself. It's just one example of that.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Ask for help, Dustin. Okay, so I have a few things to say. They're not all terribly organized, but I'm going to do my best to not go on for too long and to try to say things that are somewhat entertaining. So I am a political scientist by training, and I do work at the business school, which is an interesting thing because I am not a scholar of business. I'm not actually interested in how firms make money. That is not my primary interest in life or professionally or pedagogically.
This is on tape.
I know. Oh yeah, okay. Oops. Anyway, I think Nathan would be thrilled to hear that. Anyway, so that's not my interest, and that's not my scholarly community for the most part either. My scholarly community are people who are social scientists who engage mostly in political science and people who study Asia. And so it's an interesting position to be in to try to navigate, and this applies to a lot of people who are in interdisciplinary departments or who do interdisciplinary research from a disciplinary department. I mean, you can think of a bunch of applications. But I think one thing you have to ask yourself is where are your intellectual communities and what are the best ways that you can connect with them? So I, for example, know that I cannot skip American Political Science Association meetings because I'm not in a political science department and I need to be at those things. I have to work a little bit harder to make sure that sometimes that people in political science departments are aware of my work, because that is my scholarly community, both in terms of the people whose ideas I want to influence, but also the people who will be writing letters for me eventually, which matters also. So basically, if you have to figure out where your networks are, and then if you have easy access to them, then that's wonderful. And if you don't, you need to figure out the ways that you might need to work a little bit harder to make sure you have access to them. Another thing about the professional schools is that you have to figure out, I think, what your job really is, which means a lot of different things. So I am a political scientist, but I'm not in the government department at Harvard, meaning that the standards for my evaluation, promotion, and doing my job are not the same as Dustin's were when he was junior faculty in the government department. He had a whole different set of priorities and demands than I do. I have different things that are harder in some ways, less hard in other ways. But focusing on what your job is really important. And that sounds obvious, but let me say exactly what I mean by that. So I'm a specialist on the political economy of China, primarily on Chinese politics. There are a lot of people who study Chinese politics in China at Harvard, and many of them want to involve me in things that they're doing. And I want to be involved in many of those things. So the provost gave the advice as, cross the river and, do everything you can. And that's important if it's part of your intellectual community. But sometimes it is part of your intellectual community, but it's not your job. And so you have to figure out whether you're doing your job or you're doing a job that is someone else's job. And that could be in two ways. One way is you literally do other people's jobs for them. And I'll talk about mentoring in a second. So a lot of the times people think, I'd like to give you an opportunity, and they don't mean it malevolently, but sometimes what they mean is, I would like for you to do my job for me. And so I can't give a bunch of specific examples, but I do know of people who have failed basically to get the research done because they were being given too many opportunities by senior people who maybe even thought they had their best interests at heart, but they could not. So don't do other people's job, right? But also don't do someone else's job because you think it's your job for my job. And also I enjoy it, and I don't enjoy public embarrassment. So for me, if I were in a position where teaching didn't matter, I would still probably invest time in it because I'm afraid of being laughed at by people. But in any case, I also have to write cases, which are not professionally rewarded in my field, but they are at my job. And so if I did Dustin's job, I would fail at my job. But on the other hand, if I did the job of someone else at the business school who's not a social scientist, I would also fail at my job. So figure out clearly what your job is and just embrace it, okay? So just embrace that. Part of my job is that I am not basically doing the most, cutting edge thing in every single direction like Dustin may, but I'm doing my job in the absolute best way that I can, and these are my skills, and this is what I focus on. And you have to make that choice to decide what your job really is. But on the other hand, I've also seen people who say, well, I'm at the business school now, so I'm going to start working on management and how firms make money, and they also don't succeed. So I'm still not interested in that, and I'm not going to do that job, but I do know what my job is. Okay, so about mentoring, I think I'm going to give some kind of negative information about mentoring from my perspective. So everyone knows how to find you. You always hear mentoring is great, find a good mentor, blah, blah, blah. That's all true. Try not to allow yourself to get into a mentoring relationship that I would call binding. Right? Don't hitch your wagon to one person. Don't be on anyone's team. And that could be methodological, it could be ideological, it could be idiosyncratic and personal. But if you get into a mentoring relationship where someone tells you what to do, and if you don't do that, then that person will be frustrated with you, that's not the person to go to as a mentor. You have to do your own thing because this is Harvard, and they're not going to promote anyone, and you're not going to be happy if you do other people's thing because you think it's the path through or something. So don't think of it more like a marketplace. I ask lots of different people for their advice, and I try to be upfront. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about this, but I'd love to hear what you think. And then use the right language. I'll consider that, etc. So try to make sure that it's not a unidirectional relationship where someone's telling you what to do, but that you're still making your own decisions, and that's really, really hard in practice. But try not to think of it as binding. The other thing is try not exclusively to go to people like you. I think identity-wise, disciplinary-wise, scholarly approach, those things. So shockingly to me, the best mentor I have ever had was an older economist from Argentina who I never thought would like my work or be interested in me, and it was the best intellectual and personal professional relationship I ever had. So I think a lot of the times we get stuck where, as women, I need a senior woman as my advisor. As a person of color, I'm going to seek out the only other person of color at my school, right, to find that person. But go to a lot of different people and don't just think of it in that way. And when you get to be a mentor, primarily listen. And when you're finding a mentor, make sure the person is listening to you, because there are a lot of people who think that they have your best interests at heart, but they are not listening to you. And I won't be specific. Okay, so priority setting and time management. I think I just want to say a few things about that. So one is that, in my experience, Harvard is different from other places in that, obviously, what the provost said is true. If you publish 0 words, then things are not going to go well for you here, or when they don't go well for you, you can't go somewhere else where you'll still be happy. But also, 1 million publications may help you, but unless those publications are built around a core set of ideas, they're not likely to be that interesting to people. So at other places, they will count journal impact factor. They will count page numbers, right? I'm not saying those things don't matter here, but I definitely think that the happiest people and the most successful people do the projects they want, how they want, and make the contribution that they want to make, and really take a step back from writing 1 million papers and really think deeply about what you want to work on and what you want to say, and that is more important. So try not to get caught up in like a rat race because it's Harvard. I mean, tangibly, at my school, people will ignore the letters from your field in good and bad ways. So if they think you're amazing, they will ignore letters that say that you are not amazing. And if they think that you're terrible, they will ignore letters that say that you're the second coming. So basically, but what they will not ignore is a person who says, this is what I work on, this is what I do. And look, even if you're not successful here, if you're still proud of your core ideas, I promise that we'll all be okay somewhere eventually. So a couple of things about time management. Those of you who are at the business school see me at these kinds of things a lot, so you might be like, I'm not going to listen to anything she says. Because obviously when Judy asked me to do this, I said yes. I could have said no, and then I could be somewhere writing, but anyway, here we are. So the thing about Harvard is that there is a truly endless series of requests at all times. As just a woman who works on an important part of the world, I feel like I get a lot of it. I can't begin to imagine if I were also a person of color. You do not have to do all of these things. And if by you saying no, someone says, but then there'll be all men on this panel, that is not your problem. That is not your job, to make sure that you are representing the person on the panel. So let me just give you a couple of things that I think have helped me. So first of all, I don't reply to a lot of requests. Literally, I don't respond. Because when a telemarketer knocks on the door, I also don't answer the door. So I'm sorry about this, but if students from the Kennedy School want to meet with me about their project, I don't reply to that email. It may be rude to you, but to me, to say no only invites people to try to reschedule or do something else, and so don't do that. So in keeping with that, be honest about why you're saying no. Don't lie. Just say, I appreciate so much the request. I would love to do this. I'm limiting the amount of things I'm doing at the Fairbanks Center this semester because I'm focusing on getting my book done. Ask questions. Why did you ask me to do this? And I think especially for those of you who might be asked to do things because you're representing certain things, ask, why are you asking me to do this? If you feel like it's something that is not core to what you do. Blame people who agree to protect you. So at my associate review, the dean was like, I'm really worried about how much you're doing across the river. I said, great, then I will tell people Nitin's on my case and I can't do this kind of stuff. He said, sure. So blame people who agree to protect you, and then make your own rules. So I now refuse to participate in teaching programs where I'm the only woman and the only junior faculty. And so as soon as the people ask me, I say, am I double representing for junior and women? Because it means I'm going to get bad reviews, and I'm tired of that. So make rules and then stick to those rules. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay, so I think this is just the most important thing you can do, and I've already kind of said it, but really decide who you are as a scholar and just be comfortable with it. There are always opportunities for the newest and the next biggest thing, and if you follow those opportunities all the time, you'll find yourself, I think, overstretched and not quite grounded. And there are lots of fads and lots of pressures and lots of opportunities. And some of the opportunities seem amazing, but if they're not core to what you do, I'm making this mistake right now with something, so please do what I say, not what I do. But try to create the conditions that allow you to do your absolute best work, and that means that some things have to be about choices and you don't participate in them. But really decide, I am this person as a scholar, I have my own voice, this is what I do, and you'll be more valuable to yourself and everyone around you. It sounds like a big platitude, but that's the best I can do. On work and life. I have 2 small kids. I'm very tired. I am happy to talk about more of this in more detail about how tired I am. But first of all, on work and life, I guess the one thing I just want to say is that you should have a sense of humor. On Monday, between 10:15 a.m. and 10:30 a.m., got 2 journal rejections in 15 minutes. It was hilarious. I mean, I wanted to cry, but you just have to laugh at something like that. Within 15 minutes, 2 of them, gosh, so I guess like that's part of the process. You just kind of have to find a way to laugh and let it be what it is. I probably shouldn't be exposing my weaknesses, but there we go. Yeah, well, of course, we all get papers rejected. Just usually they're spaced out. Ask for what you need. So this person can help you a lot. Judy Singer can help you a lot in her office, and there are equivalent offices in every kind of school that can help you. So one example was when I was pregnant with my first child. We had visited Harvard daycares and realized that the lists were very long, and I did not know that we have such thing called a provost list. So the dean at every school puts ladder faculty on a special list to jump the line for daycare, and you don't know about those things unless you ask people to help you. So little things like that. Harvard has a lot of resources, and if you say, look, I am struggling, this isn't my situation, but my husband is going through a health crisis, and I need extra resources for childcare because I need it, then the chances are that they're going to be able to come up with those things. So ask for what you need. And lastly, I think just make choices. So I can't be at this reception because I have to go pick up my children. I skip almost every dinner that is ever possible to skip because I don't enjoy the dinners and I prefer to actually be with my kids. So I leave conferences early. I'm frequently the last person in the workshop, the first person out of it. I actually don't think that it really affects my life that much. I think I give the presentation that I give the best I can. When I'm there, I'm fully there, but you don't have to be there. You don't have to be there for everything. You're going to be much happier if you make the choices that sometimes you choose your personal life over your work life, and basically just agree to do it and be in the office when you're in the office and be somewhere else when you're somewhere else, and embrace those two sides of it. Thank you.
I guess, would you take questions or? Okay. So yeah, that's great. And I guess I will follow up. I had different order, but I will follow up on the work-life balance because that's what you make left the topic as. So I also have a child who's 4 years old, and working academic. I think it's really hard to ever take a break. So having a child is kind of like a break for me. In some sense, I feel like I'm always taking break. I'm taking a break from work to play with my kids, and I'm taking a break from my kids to work. So in that way, I feel like I'm always taking a break. And other things is about time management. For example, with a small child, I try to do things I like so that my child also like, so that we can do it together, and it seems to be double efficient. So that's mentioning about mountain biking. I enjoy mountain biking, so I take her mountain biking. Some people think I'm crazy, but she really enjoys it. She's really thrilled about being on the bike and seeing all this scenery. And I'm also having a good time and working out. So that's something to consider. In this job, often the expectation is that you travel a lot to kind of promote yourself, to show your work. And I think it's that aspect is true in terms of promoting yourself, letting other people know about your work, but it doesn't necessarily require traveling. It depends on your situation. So I have a friend who travels a lot, maybe almost gone every week for a day or two, but it's the opposite for me because in my case, I feel like a lot of people actually come here because this is sort of the mega. This is a place where people come. So a lot of people come here, and I make time to meet with them and to discuss with them. And I don't actually travel very much because of that. So it's kind of what will work for you in your situation. In my situation, I avoid travel if I don't have to. But I do meet people when they come, and that way I can also promote myself and promote our work. So let me tell you about a different aspect, which is interaction with students. So I'm a science faculty. We work in a lab. We have a lot of interaction with students. Every day we discuss, about whatever is going on in the lab. When I first started, this is really a role shifting. As a student postdoc, you're very focused on your work, but as you become mentor, then it's not like one day you become, this day you become a faculty and then you just know how to act like a faculty, right? Like you still take some time to figure out your roles and to figure out how to help the students to achieve their potential, and that to me is very important to make sure that my students do well. So the kind of experiment that we do is very challenging, and it has very little publication. Usually it takes 3, 4, 5 years to build up a very complicated apparatus, and finally we have our first result. And that was rejected, of course, because it's been done before, but it's not, okay? So my student works really hard. So you'll get a variety of different students. My students in general works really hard. They're very self-motivated. But sometimes they're working too hard, and they don't know this limit. And to the point which literally and figuratively, the student kind of ran into the wall. And it was important to kind of like bring sort of different perspective to the student to kind of help them. They push themselves very hard in some cases, and to know like there's actually more to life than just working on this one topic. So in that year, we had the paper rejection. Students were struggling a lot, and everything was kind of it was kind of I think it was the third or fourth year into my assistant professorship, and it seems like nothing is going anywhere. And then we got a little bit more result the following year, and all of a sudden everything changed because for some reason people start to appreciate it, and it has to do with kind of selling your work a little bit, and we made it to the cover of the Science magazine. So it was just completely like in 1 year we thought everything is just falling apart, and the next year everything is just okay again. So it's like in this journey sometimes you have these kind of very up and down experience, and it's important to kind of know your core value. I feel like I have a good direction, and this is something we're pursuing. It's very difficult. Other people don't appreciate yet until we kind of figure out a different way of selling our work. And in that case, it was actually very helpful to have a mentor because. I'm in the chemistry department. My background is in physics, so the people that I talk to in the chemistry department would, in general, offer a different perspective, and kind of using that different perspective help in that particular case help us kind of presenting our work, which I usually think in terms of presenting to physicists, then now presenting to how the chemists will see, and how actually by doing so actually brings kind of a new perspective to look at for the physicists as well. So just kind of there's an advantage in some way to be surrounded by very different people to kind of give you very different perspective. So through that experience, after everything goes well, the students, sort of having a dose of confidence and knowing, the limits of things, and sort of move on, and it's really a pleasure to see the students sort of grow every year, and they're really achieving the potential that you can see in them. Maybe just one last thing is that I encourage you to really meet the people here, or the people who are starting about the same time, because you'll go through this journey with these people because you couldn't, you will have the same kind of frustration, working with students and working with, mentor, or working with just you're in a stage of life that only people who are going through the same journey, similar journeys, will understand. And you can't complain to your student about other students, right? So, but you could talk to your colleague who experienced very similar thing at a similar stage about that sort of things. And sometimes you just need to kind of share experience and kind of brainstorm how things should go, how to problem shoot in terms of these different kind of relation. So I encourage you to really get to know each other, or it doesn't need to know everyone, but at least one or two. And for me, I did met a really good friend at the New Faculty Institute, and we have we meet for lunch kind of on the monthly basis, and then we talk about things that's going through. So it's been very helpful, and that's all I have.
So it's so good to see all of you here. I did this New Faculty Institute just a few years ago. I arrived here in the fall of 2014. So as I'm looking around the table, I'm remembering what it was like to be in your position, but in a different way, because I came as a senior faculty. And I would say that starting off in a new position, it's much nicer to be tenured than not to be tenured. So I went straight from graduate school to the University of Chicago, where I did go through the tenure track there. I was pregnant at the end of my first year there, and I survived this. So for those of you who have young children or who are thinking about starting families, I have 2 daughters, and it is possible to have a life and to get tenure as well, but it can be somewhat intense. So when I came here in the fall of 2014, my oldest daughter was about to start college. My younger daughter was going into 7th grade. My husband was starting a new position. He's a molecular biologist at a place called the RNA Therapeutics Institute at UMass Med School. So I was trying to get adjusted here, but I was also very concerned about all of them. My daughter being away at college for the first time, especially my daughter going into 7th grade. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that comic strip Life is Hell, but there's a strip that says 7th grade, the deepest pit in hell. And so I was a little worried about, we joked with my daughter, do you want to be in the deepest pit in hell in Chicago or the deepest pit in hell in Boston? And of course she preferred to be in Chicago. So this was a big move for her. And so at the same time that I was trying to get it adjusted, I was concerned about everybody else. And I'm sure that all of you are, have similar issues as well. So in my first semester at Harvard, I really, I had a couple of priorities. I was in the midst of trying to finish an edited collection, which meant a lot to me, and I definitely wanted to do that work. But I also knew from having been at Chicago and starting off there and going, through 2 decades there, that the best thing that I could do, and this is what I am suggesting to all of you, was to really get to know people in the community, to find my way around Harvard, to forge connections, to teach well. I obviously still wanted to be working on my research, and I know all of you have time pressures because you're on the tenure track. But it was really important, I think, to spend some time getting acclimated, and that meant talking to the administrators at my school who really helped me figure out what is the culture like at Harvard Divinity School, what is expected of me, but also getting to know other faculty and feeling as if I belonged here. And I think the reason I felt so strongly about that is that when I arrived at Chicago to start a junior professorship, and I'm sure some of you feel this now, I really felt as if I was so kind of small and insignificant and unimportant, and who would want to talk to me? Like who really would want to exchange ideas with me? And looking back, I wish I could go back to my younger self and say, of course people wanted to speak to you, but everybody was so busy. And you're going to find this at Harvard. Everybody is extremely busy. And so if you don't do some outreach, there are people who you would like to meet who you might not. So the best piece of advice that I heard from the New Faculty Institute 5 years ago that unfortunately I've had many occasions to reflect on was someone who said, never underestimate the social awkwardness of Harvard's faculty. This has stuck with me. I have thought of it many, many times. And the point that the person was making is that you might be thinking, I'm the new person at my school, and so this senior person should really be the one to reach out and say, let's go for tea or coffee or something. But in fact, it's quite possible that that person is just really socially awkward or shy, and they would like to get to know you better, but unless you approach them, they're not going to. So I took that to heart, and my interests are very interdisciplinary, and I just emailed various people who I thought I would really like to meet and said, do you have time for tea? Tea is a little less, right, there's less commitment than lunch, because if it's not going well, you can say it's 20 minutes, it's, oh, I have another appointment. Lunch, you have to sit all the way through. But I met with a lot of people in those first couple of months. I was sort of chronically over-caffeinated. But it was a way for me to meet people in other departments who I thought I would really like to speak to about their work. And that these were conversation partners that when I thought about coming to Harvard, I was so excited, you know, maybe I'll get to meet so-and-so in such and such a department. And so this I think was part of the reason I feel very connected here, and I think more connected after 5 years than I did certainly after 5 years at Chicago, and you know maybe not until I had been 10 years at Chicago, and it was just because I took the time to do some outreach, and so I really encourage you to do that. And if somebody doesn't respond, it's just because they're too busy or they're socially awkward and shy. Don't take it personally. There was only one person who didn't write back to me, and then I saw her about a year later, and she was so delighted to get to meet me, and I thought, but I tried to meet you before, so people do get busy here. In terms of navigating the university and your department, as you get settled in, I know you've been here now about a month. I would really caution you. When I first arrived here, it was clear that there were certain people who were hoping that I was going to be on their side about something. And so I think that, Meg said, find a mentor who, doesn't want you to speak for him or her. Even coming as a senior faculty, I felt like I had to make it pretty clear from the outset that I was independent and I was going to make my own judgments, and I really didn't want to hear negative things about my colleagues. So I don't know if this has already happened to you. If it has, my condolences. But I really suggest that you, be very cheerful and steer the conversation in other directions, because you need time to make your own judgments about things, and especially for those of you who are junior, you do not want to be embroiled in some political issue. You may eventually decide that there's something in your department or division that you would like to change. I sat quietly and listened a lot in the beginning, and I felt as if I got to figure out the personalities. I started to understand how things worked. I'm now chair of the Committee on the Study of Religion because I was quietly thinking, I really think we need to change some things here. But because I was listening respectfully, people trusted me then when it was time for me to speak about things. So just take your time. You're hopefully going to be here for a very long time, and the people who are your colleagues now will probably be your colleagues in 10 years. And so get to know people, don't rush to judgment, and try not to get involved in anything political. This includes with graduate students. You know, some of you who are coming from having recently been a graduate student, there are graduate students who are going to want you to enlist you in their causes, and you can be very sympathetic while making it clear that your priority right now is to go through the tenure process, to do your research, but not to get involved in something that you don't want to immediately. In general, I think it's just really important to listen and to keep your complaints in the beginning at least to a minimum, so that you can start to forge personal relationships and gain trust. In terms of work family, this is really hard, and I wish I could tell you that I have figured this out. I have a wonderful 2 daughters and a wonderful husband. I am committed to eating dinner with them, if not every night, almost every night. I have one commitment. I coordinate a colloquium that's once every 2 weeks from 6 to 8 p.m. But otherwise, I am always home for dinner. And I make it a point of just protecting that on my calendar. Something my husband and I often say to each other as we try to remind each other of our commitments is that we don't want to let the urgent get in the way of the important. And there are always going to be people saying, I need this from you right now. You have to do this right now. And you're going to have to set some boundaries. And I say that realizing it is so much easier to say that than actually to do it. But I hope that you'll try to figure out how to do it. One way that I do this is that I set aside 1 day a week that is just for my research. And I protect this. It's just blocked out. I actually have done that on my calendar. It says writing time. It's on Fridays. Now, tomorrow I am going to an event at my daughter's school all day. So, you know, that, but that is the kind of intrusion that I will allow to happen. But there are students who will say, please, you know, I'm really busy. Could you meet me on Friday? And I say no, because that would mean commuting in, and I really need that solid time if I still want to be a scholar who publishes things, which is what I'm hoping for. One thing that I did long ago that I don't have to do again, but I thought I would share, even though it's slightly embarrassing, just because I'm assuming some of you do have young children. When I was on the tenure track at Chicago and my daughter Claire was born, I had so many things on my list every week for articles I wanted to read, things I wanted to do, and I had a schedule for when I wanted to finish my book. I had sort of month by month, I had mapped out when I wanted to have things done. And what I really hadn't realized is that having a child was going to make all of that much more difficult, and in ways that before you have a child, nobody can tell you. You know, I was on my way to a faculty meeting one day, and I was about to leave, and Claire threw up all over my shoulder. And I thought, okay, you know, I can't go to this meeting. Or there's a child who's sick in the middle of the night, and that's not going to be a good writing day the next day. But I just realized I was never getting to my deadlines. I was never meeting deadlines. And I realized it was because what was on my calendar was all work and not family. And so what helped me at that stage in my life was to actually put on my calendar things like going to the playground, or, you know, going to the park, or movie time. And what that allowed me to do is that when I looked at my calendar and I was thinking about, okay, I need to write such and such, when am I going to do that? I had time blocked off that was family time that I was protecting. So I don't have to do that anymore, although I was thinking recently maybe I need to start again because things are encroaching. But it helped me to to see that that was also a responsibility. And I think it's easier to do in some ways when you have children because you feel like you have a responsibility to somebody else. But whether or not you have children, you have to make time for yourself. You can't work all the time. And so maybe what you're going to put on your calendar is take a walk or visit with friends or have coffee. But make sure that you create spaces for those kinds of things. I often hear junior faculty, and I'm afraid I might have sounded like this once too, say things like, I need to work really, really hard now, and then sort of my real life is going to start after I get tenure. This is your real life. Right. And you have to set you have to figure out how to manage your time now, because otherwise you will be working nonstop until you get tenure and probably beyond, because this is a kind of disciplinary process for how you're going to go forward in your career. So I am hoping all the best for all of you, and I'm happy to talk to any of you about anything I've said and other things as well.
Thanks. And my name's Dustin Tingley. I'm a political scientist, but I'm mostly going to be here today speaking from the perspective of my role as the Deputy Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, to which most of my friends say, "What's a provost?" I'm the deputy vice of that thing that you don't care about. So while I'm talking, I'm just going to hand this around. There's another pamphlet that's in your folder about something that I'll be speaking about, but just to get that going around. So I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about different resources for teaching here at Harvard, and then some things around the more research space, and then try to intersperse some of the kind of work-life type themes that have come up already. Before I do that, a father of two. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My wife is also on a tenure track, not tenured, at an area professional school. And so I'm the classic like dual academic couple with 2 kids, and every night is the family circus, and it's fun, but it can be challenging. I'll weave some of that in. So let me first talk about different approaches and resources for teaching. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start with something that I think is really important, and is also something that I would train our graduate students for when they go on the job market. I used to be the director of graduate studies, and I'd have to okay, you're going on a campus visit, what do you do? And most of the time they would come in and they'd be like, okay, I've got to polish every slide, and it's super intellectual. And then I would say, the 2 most important things for going on the campus visit are water and sleep. And I'd be like, what? What do you mean? It's like, and this kind of gets at the social awkward. This is just, really, you are a human being, water and sleep. It matters for teaching as well, okay? And so my first tip about good teaching is your good health, right? If you are not present in the classroom, your students will know, right? If you are overtired, if you are over-caffeinated, if you are not grounded, your students will pick up on it. They might not pick up on it in some sort of conscious way, but they will pick it up. It reminds me of this experience I have around horses. I was bucked off a horse when I was a little kid, and so I'm deathly scared of horses. And so a couple years ago, I was like, all right, fine, I'm going to go on a horseback ride on a tiny donkey, okay? And this is the mellowest donkey ever. They're like, no, this is this old donkey, he doesn't do anything. I got on, and the donkey was freaking out, right? And they just couldn't understand. It was just because the donkey could tell, okay? Your students can tell as well. So focus on your good health, all right? The second is your colleagues are a resource for your teaching, all right? You're coming in, you're doing path-breaking research, but you're probably going to have to teach some things that are not squarely about your own research, right? And that means that there are others who have been doing that gig, right? That doesn't mean that you go in and say, okay, I want all of your slides that I will then sort of just completely reuse. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But what did they do? What was their experience? What did they find that worked for that topical area and for the types of students that you're likely to attract, et cetera? So be proactive in doing that as well. And I think, reaching out and, at one point this goes back a ways, but I asked people in my department, how often do we ever talk about like teaching in a faculty meeting? Because it hasn't happened yet, and I'm a little bit confused. And they're like, yeah, we don't really do that, I guess. And I'm like, all right, well, shouldn't we? And kind of got that look, oh God, we've got an agitator here. But I think that proactivity can be to your benefit, and what it will do will save you time. And there are a couple of things that all of you are scarce in, but the number one thing that you will be scarce in is time, right? And there's great work in psychology that shows that you basically make the worst decisions about the thing that you're scarce in, right? We make our worst decisions when it comes to managing our time, okay? Because that's the thing that we are fundamentally most scarce in. To that end, feel free to use different tools. So I'm going to start to thread this in. One of the tools that we've built around this sort of being able to find out how other people have taught things is a tool, syllabus.harvard.edu, where we have collected syllabi from across almost all of the schools. A couple, sorry, the business school aren't included yet, but they will be soon. And it just lets you go in and find syllabi using keyword. It's like Google, but for like Harvard syllabi. You're like opening your eyes like, what? Mind blown. Right? Like this exists, okay? Reduce the transaction costs that it takes for you to be able to leverage these types of resources.
You're taking notes.
Okay, yeah, good. Syllabus.harvard.edu. Okay, next, understand that there is a community here that is welcoming your commitment to teaching. One of those communities is professional teaching and learning centers that are present at many of your schools. And if you don't have a teaching and learning center, you have people whose job it is to help you in the classroom. This reminds me of the comment around like the library is there to serve you, to help you. These professionals are hungry for you to go and be like, I want help. Like in some senses, it's like I've gone in a couple times and it's like, oh, no, back off. That's too much, right? They are hungry to help you with your teaching, right? They value it. They love it when faculty come in. And same with the libraries, right? I've had wonderful experiences going in and just being like, I'd like my students to have access to these resources. Can anyone sort of help me with it? And, like 2 days later, I've got exactly what I need. Okay, so leverage those resources. If you don't, then these are investments that we sort of have to make because we need to say to the rest of the world we care about teaching that will just be squandered. Okay, so take advantage of those investments that others are making. Beyond your own school, there are even broader university-wide things. So I'm the director of HILT, the Harvard Initiative for Learning and Teaching, hilt.harvard.edu. And what this does, we run an annual conference. We do things that are on particular areas. We just ran one on peer learning. Peer learning is a really vibrant way to introduce the ability of students to learn from each other. It turns out when one student is teaching another student something, the person who's doing that teaching actually learns the content themselves. My own teaching career is basically that, right? We also have a newsletter. Many of you are already getting it, called Into Practice. It just showcases people who are just doing concrete, actionable things for your own teaching and what you might be able to do. That's called Into Practice. It will comes into your inbox. And we also have a grant fund to, if any of you want to be innovating and have an idea of like, oh, I really want to push the frontier on something. Let me switch back. So those are kind of some resources. Let me then just make some commentary. So teaching is not just about resources, all right? I think it's about a state of mind where you are being intentional about your teaching. I oftentimes find that many folks coming out of a PhD program are hyper-intentional about their ability to deliver their own research and hyper-unintentional about their teaching. And you know what? That's not your fault. You were not trained in many graduate programs to take that sort of intentionality around teaching to be at the same level as your intentionality around research, okay? So it's not your fault to date, but it is your fault moving forward if you don't try to bring an intentional framework to mind. So just like, even just simple things, telegraphing about what you want to accomplish in a course. I mean, it seems simple, right? Like, it's telling students, these are the things that I want you to learn. These are great things to have out on the table. So I think there's just just trying to be intentional about that process rather than just winging it, okay? I think also just to reflect on something, so teaching can be a refreshing break from research. I got to put it out there. Like, I love doing research, but you know what? It just gets grueling sometimes. I got to do something different, okay? And teaching can serve that role. vice versa, research can be a great break from teaching too. And even service, like, so you're going to get asked to do service. Like, sometimes service is a great break from research and teaching. Like, these are great opportunities just to do something else, kind of mix it up, take your mind off of it a little bit. I think that brings me to like a work-life balance type comment, which is, there's been some great commentary on how to manage the family aspect of our lives. Mindful of the fact that we can always, as academics, just keep working. I continue to have a problem, which is I find it hard to be 100% present when I'm at home. Okay? It's a challenge for me. Why is it a challenge? Because I can always be thinking about whatever, about some administrative thing, or about some research thing, or like, why isn't this code working, or whatever else, right? We as academics can do that. I can be, Judy, how's it going? I can be talking to Judy, but thinking about something else, okay? Your spouse, your kids, if not explicitly, at least subconsciously, will pick that up, right? And so I just put that out there as that's something that I personally struggle with. But it is, I think, really important to focus on how to be present with whomever you are with, whether it's your young children, a graduate student, a spouse, et cetera. Before I just very briefly talk about some research things, let me comment on something that is kind of implicitly come up in some of the other comments, which is oftentimes we think about the university being composed of students, which could be graduate students or not, faculty. And then we oftentimes talk about administrators, but we think about a certain type of administrator, which is like Judy or Alan or Evelynn or, like the big, really important people, okay? Yeah, they're important, but you know what? Your front office staff, right? The people who support your department, the people who, we might call them things like a secretary or whatever. No. That's a teammate, okay? These are people who your day-to-day life actually kind of depends on them. Value them. Tell them that you value them. Develop relationships with them, okay? I think that's really, really important. We have amazing staff here who are administrators, and they deserve our respect and support. Okay. So I'm going to very briefly talk about some research things. Others have weighed in on scholarship much more directly. Two things. So in your pamphlet, in your red folder, there's a pamphlet about something called Open Scholar. Okay, so why am I talking about this? How many of you have a website? Okay. How many of you have to go in and sort of do a lot of management on it? It's like a WordPress thing. You got to update it. He's shaking you. Yeah, it's rough. Okay, why? It's that's not your job. Is your job on your CV? Like, I'm a website developer. You're at the Chan School of Public Health. I don't think so. Right? Yeah. Okay. So openscholar.harvard.edu. This is a product that some people built here at Harvard, not myself. This is a website system designed for scholars, okay? It is a system where you go in, you put in your information, they take care of all of the security updates, and they take care of the theming and layout, et cetera. And it provides you with the ability to have a professional looking public presence on the web. And guess what? The web is one major way that you have a presence, okay? So it just saved me so much time over many years. I just highly recommend it. Okay, the second is a new thing that we have just rolled out. And in some senses, this new product is something that we've just rolled out that is hyper-designed for this audience, okay? And this is Link. So link.harvard.edu. So Link, essentially what we did, I was kind of frustrated with Harvard's so scattered around, there's so many institutes, there's so many different organizations, there's so many different news feeds and event feeds, and how do I find this person's website? I heard they might be interesting, and Harvard is so big, and then people would say, well, one Harvard, and then I'm talking to Judy one day, and I'm kind of a data guy, and I'm like, wait, I think we can I think we can build something that starts to address all of these sort of costs of your being able to find things that are interesting. And essentially what we did, you can go to this, your profile is already loaded up, you go to it, and we've taken information that we knew about you from public sources, that is to say your existing website. You might want to change it. And we take the words off your website, then we take the words that are in different news stories or event feeds or different organizations, or we're even doing something now around research funding opportunities, and we just make some recommendations for you. So these are other people that you might be interested in at Harvard, at different places. This is an event that you might want to go to, or you might want to tell a student of yours about, et cetera. It's all automated. You don't have to do anything except go to it and log in and experience it, and feel free to give feedback. So this is new. It is designed in part because we want people who are entering this community to have a 360-degree view of what is possible at Harvard, and in a way that is somewhat personalized to the interest that you in particular might have. So link.harvard.edu. You got some use cases for it. Please use it and provide feedback, and welcome all of you to this great community. Thank you.
So since I'm preventing you from having a reception, I just want to make a few remarks. I want to talk about one of the things that I think we ignore a little bit when we come to Harvard, and that is, what kind of place is this? So I want to say some things about that, and then I want to say some things about mentoring. So I have to say, even after 17 years, there are moments when I just feel that I cannot have imagined that this would be as wonderful a place as it is. It's not always happy place, but it's a wonderful place. And this is my favorite time of year. Pretty soon, it is going to be absolutely gorgeous here. And walking across the yard, and the old yard, the Widener yard, all of this, it's just going to be stunning. And you will pinch yourself and say, how did I get here? What did I do to have this beautiful place, be in this beautiful place all the time? So this is the time of year. Take walks. There are so many beautiful vistas around here. Take a walk down to the river and walk around campus when you get a chance. So I just want to say that. And then I just want to say something that I think is really important for those of you who have young children. It's a great place to raise young children. One of the things, the Harvard museums are great places to take your kids. The rock collection is open at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. So if you have a little early riser, you can go in there. And there are plenty of other little early risers in there as well, running around, looking at the rocks and all the artifacts in the Peabody Museum. And you can have a birthday party in the Peabody Museum too. So these are things you can use. Also, across the river, far, far away, as the Honor Arboretum, but that's a Harvard institution. It has big, flat, wide sidewalks that your kids can run around in, beautiful trees, and it's just a beautiful place as well. And then I have to say this about sort of Ivy League athletics. For those of you who came from places where there's like serious football, our football is kind of interesting, but it's not serious football. But that means that it feels it feels really kind of on a smaller scale. The stadium is wonderful, but also the best is basketball. It's almost like going to a high school basketball game. It's a small gym, and the kids love it because you sit up close to the players. So that's another thing to do. We have lots of music all the time, and so it's a wealth of riches, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing in one sense. So I wanted to say the good things first. It's a wonderful place to be. Please get to know the venue. I mean, it's really special. But secondly, sometimes it's like being in the candy store and you don't know what to do. So this month, these are the things on my calendar for this month. To speak at the Women's Center last night. Dinner with Dean and colleagues next week. Go to one of my colleagues' book releases next week. The following week, Skip Gates and Lonnie Bunch, the new president of the Smithsonian Institution, will be talking at the museums. There's an Angela Davis symposium following that. There's a big event at the School of Public Health on slavery and public health. There's another big event at Radcliffe on Writing Black Lives. There's a Blacks in Design conference at GSD coming up. And then I have 2 faculty meetings a month. That's just 1 month. And it plays itself out. There are weeks when it could be you could be out doing things every night. And so what I want to say is these are wonderful, wonderful special events. Nobody draws the kind of people and do the kind of convenings that we do. You must take advantage of them. At the same time, you must plan. You have to think about it. If I've been out for dinner 3 nights in a week, my son is 16 and a half, and he is very vocal about that. Oh, you're being out and about again. I think you've been out and about a lot this week, Mom. So I'm like, okay, sweetie, fine. We'll fix that. You have to pay attention to those kinds of things. And I think Catherine is right. You have to be deeply planful, intentional about it because, for example, I wouldn't want you to miss Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, giving a big talk here. And, this is the kind of person you want to see this person, one of the great visionaries of our time. The last year or so, we had Toni Morrison gave her last 3 sets of lectures. We all kind of knew maybe it was the last time we would see her at Harvard. But anytime you had a chance to see Toni Morrison, you got to go see Toni Morrison. You have to do this. And so those are the kind of big things that are just the kind of things that you look back on a year and say, that was absolutely remarkable that I got to do these kinds of things. But at the same time, you have deadlines, you have commitments to your family, to your work, to your departments. But think about some of these things as you're walking around in the rock collection with your child early on a Sunday morning, that you have to do things that feed your soul. You really do. Because you will be working hard. You worked hard to get here. You're going to be working hard while you are here. So the first thing I'd say about that is don't flirt with burnout. It's really easy to think you can do it all the time. No. I had a graduate student of mine, former student of mine, who became president of the Social Science Research Council. She came to visit me to talk to me about this job. And we were walking. We were going to walk down to the river. I never made it down to the river. I was breathing. I was really heavy breathing. She's like, what's going on? I said, I don't know. I've been like this for a couple of days. We went straight to the health center. I had pneumonia. I didn't even know I had pneumonia. I just thought, well, it's just kind of tired. But that's what I mean by flirting with burnout. I should be thinking, now if I'm breathing heavily like this and I can't walk to the river, there's something going on that I need to be paying attention to and not saying, maybe I'll get an extra hour of sleep tomorrow and it'll go away. So that's really, really important. And then the last thing, again, was about really being intentional about your time. It's so easy to get pulled into all kinds of things here because most of them are wonderful and incredible and special, and you can talk yourself into that you just got to do it all, but you really can't do it all. So that's the important part. But think of the riches of this place. You get a lot of information about when these events happen or going to happen. It's really easy to look a few months ahead and say, this one is going to be really special, and I'm going to make sure I can go to that. The other thing I try to do a lot when my son was young, and even now, though as a teenager he has different priorities, but when he was young, to bring him to things that he would actually end up feeling really good about having had a chance to be engaged in. And so those are kind of memorable events that are just really special. And that goes down to everything, including the turkeys being up in the trees in the yard and all the cops standing around trying to decide if they're really going to try to shoot it or something. Kids love watching that stuff. So just think about that, those kinds of ways in which Harvard can be helpful to you while you're also trying to spend time with your family. Now, on mentorship, I want to say a few things, because I think in a lot of ways we can get pretty formulaic about mentorship, about mentoring, about having mentors, and about being a mentee. And my feeling is, first of all, if you have only one mentor, you do not have enough. You should probably have 4 or 5. These are people who are going to do different things for you in your life. It's rare that you get, like what Meg described, that one person who was just really super special, unusual, and became had such a formative impact on or an important impact on your life. A lot of times you can have mentors like that, but sometimes it's just a person who is maybe a role model, and you just enjoy chatting with them, and they give you some insights about the world in general. You can have a mentor whose best thing that they can do for you is provide their content expertise. I have a mentor, the only thing we've shared is the fact that she read my dissertation as I was turning it into a book. She read it 4 times and redlined it. That was, I can't even tell you what a gift that was. We don't really do much else. She's really good at that. And she's, for my entire career, has been the person I'll say, I think this paper is done, and she'll write back, no, not nearly at all. And but she is a tough critic and a great editor and an honest interlocutor. So you need somebody like that in your life. You need someone with a wide network of contacts who can say, if you're going to go out to the University of Chicago to do something, this is somebody you need to talk to. These are people you need to be in connection with, and that you need to be, they need to know you and about your work, and you need to know them. Someone who has influence in the field, who can kind of help you situate your work. And so these are not people you spend necessarily a lot of time with, but it's a quality time for specific sets of goals and things that they can provide for you that not many other people can. And the other thing is, the other place that a lot of us like to spend time is walking around the Fresh Pond Reservoir, which is also beautiful many times a year. And sometimes you just need somebody who only wants to do that, who wants to just walk in with the talk, chat about things, be outside. I personally enjoy those kinds of folks. And I also enjoy finding anybody, I don't know if anybody grew up in the South in the room. Hey, great. So one of the things I do with my Southern friends is we always are talking about the best fried chicken in Boston. And if you know anything, you need to talk to me. So I need my Southern friends because it's really hard to get good fried chicken here in Boston. I don't know why, but it is. And then I think, so the different kinds of people, and again, this is an intentional thing. It's sort of building your team. You need somebody within your department, and you need people outside of your department. It's really important to have someone in your department because they know the lay of the land. And someone who will be interested and help you navigate what can sometimes, faculty meetings are very hard to decipher exactly what's happening in them. And it's really good to have someone who's been around for a long time to give you some insights about that. And then outside your department, because learning this institution is really complicated. And I would say even now, there's just things that I still will say, I have no idea what that was about, or why we do this that way, or they're just things you don't know. And it just takes a long time to get that kind of insider's knowledge. So you don't have to pick a bunch of mentors, and you probably already still have some that you can enlist as you go through this part of the process of your career. For me, I keep when I get a mentor, I keep a mentor. That's just how it is. So Mrs. Mann, who I still refer to as Mrs. Mann, was my 4th grade teacher, and she was, her passion in life were biographies of African Americans. We still talk about that. And I love Mrs. Mann, and it's just some days you might say, gee, I'll call Mrs. Mann and see how she's doing today, and we can talk about something. And just those kinds of people who just radiate back to you your specialness, your value, your help, the way in which you help them and the ways in which they help you. And then also, when you have chosen mentors, particularly ones that are engaged deeply in your work with you, it's really important to be respectful of their time, to really think about the mentoring relationship, what kind it is, what you're trying to get out of it, and have a plan for, I really need to talk to this person about my publishing schedule. Maybe I'm having some trouble with it. I need to talk about that specifically. Let someone know, this is why I want to talk to you today. why I want to set up a time to talk with you in the next week, because I'm trying to make my plan and figure out my timeline. And so it's really important to interact with your mentor in that kind of mentor efficiently and effectively, because people will say, I'm really, really busy, and if they think you're coming to chat, they may not make time for you. If they think what we're going to do is work on your publishing plan today and get some feedback about it, and you will have sent them your ideas beforehand, then they might say, sure, I do have half an hour to sit and talk with you about that, okay? Because it's something substantive and they already know, and they know what's going to be expected of them. The other thing is, as you go along the process, the more you understand about what's going to be asked of you in terms of preparing for tenure, the better off you are. In this case, more information is the best road to go down. And then with your mentor, particularly ones in your department and those in your field, it's really important to be seen as someone who's engaged. Not just sort of a tunnel into your work, I'm really trying to understand how to do X or Y in my work, but actually someone who's engaged with the bigger, broader ideas in the context of the work that the community of people working on similar topics are engaged in. And so being an engaged intellectual, I think, is something that's also important. And a lot of people who will take you on as a mentor like that, they get something out of that. They get something out of having those kind of conversations with you. Just like as you come to become mentors, and many of you probably already are, but how you love the graduate student who just comes in excited, on fire about something. And then, the best part is if they say, actually, what you said in lecture last week made me feel this way. And you said, oh my God, thank God, somebody got it. So you get something out of it too. And so being that with your mentors is also important, to be an engaged scholar with them. And so I think that's for me, one of the most important things. I like that the people that I spend time with, that I agree to be engaged with them on this journey, are actually passionate about their work and maybe even remotely interested in mine. That's fun too. So be an engaged mentee. So think about who you want for your mentors, but also think about what it means to be a mentee at the same time.
So we are ready to close this out and move to a reception. And I just want to say a few words of both thanks to the panelists, who are absolutely terrific in terms of providing advice. You should think about some of these comments as these questions come up, because people were talking about some of the challenges of time management, for example, coping with rejection, relocating, all of the challenges that you're going through. Some of the opportunities and mentors can be helpful. Peer mentors can be helpful. Some of the questions that you're asking, talking to the other tenure track faculty in your department or outside your department, those are people who could be extremely helpful in that regard. And since we're about to go into reception, let me give you a hint on how to talk to Harvard faculty. Okay? There are 2 questions you can ask any Harvard faculty member, and they pretty much will fill more than tea time. 1, what are you working on? Okay? Everybody likes to talk about what they're working on. And if that fails, what are you teaching? And people like to talk about what they're teaching. And those 2 questions will fill up all blank space that you have available. So with that, I want to thank our panelists for their remarks. Thank all of you for coming, and you'll get lots of emails from me during the course of the year inviting you to lots of events. Please come early and come often. And some of them will be professional development events, some of them will be arts events, but it's just an opportunity. And if you really don't know who to ask, just ask me, and I can pretty much find the answer out, or at least point you in the right direction. So thank you all, and please come join us.